Welcome back, everyone, to the final module for today, which is changing cages. So, multiple recovery pathways. The road to recovery is as unique to the individual as the experience of addiction itself. It's based on some common features and some specific aspects of the person's experiences, situations, and personalities. So, as you learned in the Sharing Cages book, there was for each of those individuals a tipping point, so to speak. This was the moment when consequences of using outweighed the benefits. And for some individuals, you might call this hitting bottom. And bottom is different for everyone. You might have the threat of divorce or financial losses. But for others, it might be an overdose experience or the inevitability of death. So change typically progresses through stages. The theory behind this was first discovered by Prochaska, Norcross, and DiClemente in 1995 while they were working with individuals who were recovering from nicotine addiction. The concepts have now been generalized to other addictions and even other areas of our lives. The model proposes that individuals recovering from addiction will experience five stages of change. They're explained in an order in this class, but each individual passes through these stages differently. They're not linear, meaning it's not a step-by-step process. A person can start at any one of these stages and return back to these stages depending on what happens in their life experiences. But let's take a look at those stages a little more in detail. So you have the pre-contemplation stage. This person has no intentions of changing behaviors in the foreseeable future. They are often unaware that they even have an issue. Others, however, have noticed the person's issues and their distress. So you might hear this person say, I don't have a problem with alcohol. I just made a bad choice that night and drove. So throughout an individual's experiences, they may move into the contemplation stage. And this is where a person is beginning to think seriously about addressing behaviors, but hasn't quite made a commitment yet. They're aware of the problem, and they might be wrestling with ambivalence or being on the fence about change. They're weighing out the benefits of continued use and the effort, cost, and possible discomfort of changing. So you might hear this person say, I might have a problem with alcohol, but I like drinking with my friends and I need to relax. Plus, treatment takes a long time. So if this person moves forward, they'll move into the preparation stage. This person is now intending to act in the near future and is making small behavior changes. They're testing the waters of change. So they're not ready to make major changes that are necessary for full recovery, but they are getting there. So you might hear this person say something like, I want to stop drinking and I went to an AA meeting last week, but I still haven't completely put the drink down. I have reduced my number of days that I drink from 7 to 3. And then the next stage would be the action stage. In this stage, a person is now modifying their behavior, thoughts, activities, and/or environment to address the problem. People can see changes being made as the person starts committing their time, energy, and focus into recovery. This stage usually occurs anywhere between 6 months and 1 year in the recovery phases. You might hear them say, yeah, I stopped drinking. I'm going to AA meetings a few times a week and I'm in group counseling. So once the person moves into the final stage, which is maintenance, this person is working on their goals and preventing relapses. They're typically free of their drug or behavior of choice for some time now, and they've reached milestones in recovery. They are maintaining new and healthier lifestyles. So you might hear this person say, I have been free of alcohol a year now. I attend my meetings still, but I also have a full-time job to keep up on. My next goal is to reach 3 years sober. Any questions so far on the stages of change? This is kind of a graph model of what it might look like for an individual moving through stages. Now, as I said, you might have an individual that starts the recovery process at contemplation and then moves up to preparation, reaches the action phase, and has some sort of a major crisis or a setback in their life that moves them back to this stage. And they can move backwards and forwards in this stage multiple times before finally reaching maintenance, and in some forms of the theory, the exit from the recovery process. Now, as you'll notice, I have relapse separate. Relapse is not a part of the linear stages that we're talking about. It is actually a part of every one of these stages. And so I want to talk about relapse for a minute. This is a naturally occurring part of making change, but there is a common misconception with relapse. Some people believe that any use of a substance or engaging in a behavior is a relapse. This promotes the idea that one glass of wine or one shopping trip is a complete failure, and it can lead to discouragement and further setbacks. Research has showed us there are actually three distinct types. You have slips, which are one or two time use of the substance or engagement in the behavior. The individual typically catches themselves and stops quickly, returning back to the recovery process. You also have lapses, which is a momentary return to old use or behaviors. This may last longer than a slip, but the person does catch themselves and continues on with recovery. And finally, you have relapses. These are a complete 180-degree return to old behaviors, habits, and use that were present before the start of recovery. So let me ask you guys, in your experience, anytime you've heard someone relapse, whether it was addiction or dieting, did they have this misconception that one little accident, one use, one diet break, and they failed?
A lot of times they do, but you try to get across that you can go back. You can go back to not using it again.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we even have certain treatment programs that kind of promote the idea that a one-time or two-time use is actually a failure. And the example I will give is if you have an organization that is counting the days sober. If you have an organization like that, in some of those circles, if you have one day where you've had a beer or a glass of wine, your days sober start over. This has been very controversial with a lot of us for a while. Should the days start over that they have been in recovery if they have one drink, or should they continue?
I think if they're able to stop, that's an encouragement, is how many days you've been able to overcome this.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we do have programs that promote that there is only one type of relapse, and it's whatever you've done or whatever you've used. Um, so those are some of the common misconceptions, but relapse can happen in any stage of change, even maintenance. An individual might suffer a life crisis and have a 1 or 2 day incident where they drink, like the death of a loved one, for example. So, finding purpose. So, a lot of people ask this question at some point in their lives: what is my purpose? Unfortunately, when we think of the answer to this, we're often searching for some big, grandiose type of purpose, like inventing something new or building a big business or saving the world. And really, our lives are actually filled with many purposes, such as being a good mother or father, inspiring coworkers or colleagues, caring for sick family members, or being a good friend to someone who's struggling, as well as many more. So, our purpose is the reasons that we get out of bed each day. It's the people, places, and things that drive us, that motivate us. So when you add spirituality and self awareness, this is what assists you in finding your place in your community, your nation, and the world, and develop your sense of meaning and purpose. If I was to ask you guys right now, what is your purpose in life? What would you say to me?
I don't know.
And that would be the very common answer is I have no idea. But our purpose is our sense of meaning. It's our sense of motivation. Yet many of us, when we're asked, we can't identify what our purpose is. So when we look at the wheel of recovery, In the center, initially with addiction, the center contained our drugs of choice, those substances or behaviors that were our go-tos. But when you change the wheel to the wheel of recovery, we replace that with purpose. Purpose becomes the center of us, and it, just like addiction did, shares a reciprocal relationship with all of those other aspects of life, including those bigger aspects on the outside. Does this make sense so far?
Yeah.
All right. So let's look at a way to create our cage for change. So creating a cage that fosters positive change is part of recovery. The rat park experiment showed us how this works. The rats had many things that motivated them, toys, friends, and so on. The things in your environment are as important, but we also require additional tools as complex beings. So your cage for change stands for coping skills, acceptance, goal setting, and expectations. So coping skills means developing skills that can be used as protective factors even when risk factors are present in our lives. Acceptance is learning and practicing acceptance that assists in building resilience against those things we cannot change. Goal setting is setting and maintaining goals for making positive changes in a well thought out plan. And expectations, to see great change is to expect it. This includes preparing for positive and negative aspects of change. So I have a little bit of a project for all of us, and then we will return back to this in a second. This is called the Self-Care Challenge. Building coping skills and self-care for both negative addictions and aspects of our lives that can place you at risk is a key part of recovery. So if everyone would take out a scratch piece of paper or a lined piece of paper for a moment, and I would like you to draw this diagram. So you're going to have 4 categories in this diagram. You're going to have daily, weekly, monthly, and occasionally. So your challenge is this. In each of these categories, I would like you to put something that you do for self-care. So 5 things that you do daily, 5 you do weekly, 5 monthly, and 5 occasionally. Now here's the catch. You can't overlap the categories. So it's got to be 5 original things in daily, 5 weekly, 5 monthly, and 5 occasionally. And I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. Okay, so how did you guys do on these categories?
It was pretty tough.
Pretty
Trying to
tough?
fill them all in.
Did anybody get 5 in any of the categories?
I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh. What category?
Daily.
Daily? Daily. All right. What were some of the examples from daily self-care that you guys put in?
Meditation.
Meditation.
I guess this is more of like a basic thing, but I put showering.
Showering.
That one too.
Yes. Showering is part of self-care. What other types of things?
I also did play video games. It's a big stress relief.
I think for some of us that would be more in the weekly or monthly category.
Yeah.
So yeah, there you go. Play video games. What else did you guys get in daily?
Go for a walk.
Go for a walk. That's a good one. Okay, what about weekly? Would you guys, anybody get anything in weekly?
Spending time with friends.
Friends?
I put sleeping in.
Sleeping in.
On my days off.
That's definitely a good one, for sure. What about monthly?
Take my car to the car wash.
Car wash. What did
My
you get,
car.
Carol?
Hiking.
Hiking. Ooh, you actually go hiking every once a month? Oh, that would be pretty neat. Okay, and last but not least, did anybody get anything in the occasionally category?
I did. I put swimming or going to the beach.
All right. So here's a couple of other things to maybe brainstorm that you could add to this. What about wellness checkups at the doctor's? Wouldn't that be part of self-care? And the dentist too. Once a year going in for a teeth cleaning? Who goes and gets their hair done?
Once in a while.
Once in a while. So that might be an occasional or a monthly, depending on your hair maintenance. So that's another one. Same thing with nails. Pedicures and manicures could be something that could be added. What about listening to music?
I have that on my daily.
Your daily?
Daily. Yeah.
All right. Another one you might add to here in the weekly or later categories is discovering new music. That's an interesting coping skill where people will sift through common bands and find new unfound bands who someday become famous. So there are a lot of things that we can add in here for our coping skills. Watching movies would be another example. Going to dinner. I know not so much this year, but in normal circumstances. So we actually have a lot more coping skills than we realize we do when it comes to self-care. But having this self-care is the very base of developing coping skills, not only for recovery, but for our own personal growth in our lives. So we'll hop forward from this one. And we'll talk about coping with urges. So the first part of this is recognizing triggers. Triggers are the people, places, and things that prompt you to use. Then we learn methods to deal with them when they occur. So triggers can be senses, such as things you see, taste, touch, hear, or smell. Triggers can be thoughts or emotions, and they can be things in your environment or people and places. So here is an example chart of someone who was determining their triggers. And as you can see, this person had some sense triggers. So seeing someone drinking a beer, hearing a can crack open, just smelling alcohol, hearing people talk about getting drunk, and seeing a beer commercial on television were all things that were sense triggers for her. Then you have her thoughts and emotions that were triggering her. She said that when she gets angry, when she thinks about the fun that she used to have while she was drinking, when she feels sad or lonely, and then when she succeeds at something or when she's really happy or excited can also trigger her. And then environmental things that could trigger her. Her old bar hangout, football games, old drinking buddies, holiday parties, and places that sold alcohol were all triggers for her in early recovery. And one thing that I want to point out with this chart is that triggers do not have to be negative. If you'll notice, a lot of the triggers that she has on here are either positive or neutral types of triggers. And very often when someone is in recovery and they're looking for those triggers, they're looking for the negative things. When I feel this negative emotion, or when this negative person comes into my life, and they often lose sight of things like success. Celebrating with a beer after a hard day's work can be just as much of a trigger as loneliness. So that's something to watch out for, is positive and negative triggers. So moving on, if you'd like to pause the video here and fill out the trigger log that we've provided you in your workbook pages for this section, then you can resume the video once you have completed those. Okay. Sorry, I'm staring at the screen. I need moments to segue. Okay, so dealing with urges. So urges can occur whether a trigger is known or unknown. So one of our ways that we can combat these urges is creating a distraction. And I've left this chart blank so that we could brainstorm what some potential distractions could be. So if you're an individual, let's say you're recovering from alcohol, and you start feeling a really strong urge to use, what are some things that you could do to distract yourself from that urge?
Breathing.
Did you say breathing?
Mm-hmm.
So like deep breathing?
Yeah.
All right. Deep breathing's a good one. What's another thing you guys could use to distract yourselves?
A lot of times, I know, like especially with smoking, people carry gum like something to distract their brain.
Chew gum. That's a good idea. All right. What's another thing for distractions?
I've heard of people just going for something sweet, eating something sweet.
Oh, yes. I often bring donuts to many of my meetings. They are quite loved. What's another distraction?
Doing housework, or if you're just around the house. So.
Yes. Doing chores or housework is definitely a way to keep yourself busy. We don't want to be idle. What about taking a walk?
Yeah.
Maybe taking a walk? That might be a good one to add on here. Carol, you have a good one that you've mentioned in here that can actually help someone with an urge.
Meditating?
Meditating, yes. Meditation. We could also add something like yoga, getting into more of an active meditation type would be another good one. All right, so, we could definitely go on and on with this. And if you look in your workbook, we've given you many suggestions for ways that you could distract yourself that we haven't included here. So I suggest that you read through your distraction chart before moving on. So there are some other strategies for dealing with urges. One is avoidance. So you can avoid your triggers. You can't avoid your triggers forever. But in early recovery, it is best to stay away from places, people, and things that can cause you to have an urge. You can remove yourself if you encounter a person, place, or thing that prompts an urge, and you should have a plan for removing yourself from that situation. You can develop coping statements. This is positive self-talk in which you reword the thoughts that are associated with an urge. So if you hear yourself saying, I could have just one beer, I deserve it, you could change that thought to, I deserve to live a healthy, sober life. And then having a lifeline. These are a person or persons that you can call when an urge strikes. It's suggested that you collect the contacts for several sober supports and keep them in your wallet. That way you can reach out to them if you're having an urge and talk it through. And then there are the 3 R's of coping with urges. That's reminding, revisiting, and rehearsal. So you can remind yourself of the motivations to quit, why you quit in the first place. You can remind yourself of the negative consequences you've experienced when you were addicted. You can revisit your goals and the ways you envision the rest of your life and ask yourself, how will using affect these goals? And rehearsal. Practice ways to deal with triggers when you do encounter them. Develop no statements. These are polite ways to turn down people who offer you a beer at the next party you're at, and practice them ahead of time. And then, of course, practice ways to excuse yourself when you're faced with a triggering situation. Any questions about this part so far? No, pretty good, all-encompassing. So disputing irrational beliefs is another coping skill that we can develop in recovery. Behaviors begin with a thought, and beneath every thought is a belief. Irrational beliefs can affect the way that we think and behave and can be risks for relapse. So to begin to discern irrational beliefs from rational ones, you ask yourself 3 important questions. Is it true? Does it make sense? And is it helpful? An irrational belief can be true, but unhelpful to your goals. And it can be partially true, but make little sense in the situation. And I'll give you an example. If I drink, no one's going to like me. Is that true? Probably not. I'm sure there's people that will still like you even if you drink. Does it make sense? Not really. Why would people hate someone for consuming alcohol? And is it helpful? Definitely not. So this is a way to determine whether or not the thoughts that we're having in that moment are being fueled by rational or irrational beliefs. So is it true? Does it make sense? And is it helpful? If you can answer no to any of these questions, you might be experiencing an irrational belief. So there are some other common ways of having thinking errors, and these are just a few that we've selected. One of them is thinking in absolutes. This includes saying the word must, have to, and should. in statements that put unrealistic demands on ourselves, others, and your world. So here's some examples. She shouldn't have done that to me. I have to be the best at this. There's overgeneralizations. This includes saying words like always, never, and only in statements. Nothing in life is absolute. And this limits the possibilities, sets us up for discouragement, and it also leads to confusion when situations happen in a gray area in our lives. So, for example, I never succeed at anything. Things never work out for me. Typically, when I hear an individual in my classes say one of these statements, we look for exceptions. Well, you never succeeded in anything, but you told me you have a college degree. Oh, well, yeah, there was that one time. And then you can kind of figure out some exceptions to those rules. So we have 3 types of beliefs. We have beliefs about self. These, you might hold yourself to specific standards using absolute thinking and becoming frustrated with yourself when you don't meet them. It can lead to giving up on recovery during a slip or a relapse. I never succeed at anything. Why would I succeed at this? I have to stay sober or no one will like me. These are absolute statements and beliefs about ourselves that can cause a lot of negative feelings and end up being a risk of relapse itself. We have beliefs about others, irrational beliefs about the people that we encounter in the world. She shouldn't have made fun of me when I slipped and drank. Well, maybe she shouldn't have, but she did. And then we have beliefs about life. These are irrational beliefs about the world itself from our subjective perspective. When things don't go as we expect, we can become frustrated, stressed out, and even sad. You can hear people say things like, "This always happens to me." So practicing acceptance. We're going to read a short story from our workbook, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. It's Monday morning, and you leave the house in your usual rush. The bus you're riding on is 86 degrees, and you begin to grumble under your breath about pollution and the bus system needing to fix their air conditioning. At the coffee shop, you find a long line and tap your foot impatiently, still angry over the heat on your ride. You snap at the cashier, pointing out that they don't have enough workers for the numbers of customers that they have. She apologizes, but you're already late, and now the act is unforgivable. This always happens to me, you think as she hands you the drink. Outside, you rush to the office door and find you can't get on the elevator up to your floor because it's too crowded. So you wait, impatiently pushing the button over and over again in hopes it moves the elevator faster. Not that any of us are guilty of that one. No one ever takes the stairs anymore. Finally, you reach your desk and sit down with a sigh. You're frustrated and angry, the morning's events still playing in your head. One sip of your coffee and you shout, "Seriously? That place never gets it right." And toss out your coffee you just paid for. Your secretary approaches you sheepishly to give you the bad news that a report you were waiting on is going to be a day late. The employee ran into some issues with the research. Your whole day continues to involve little frustrations, one after another, each eating away at you and building the negative emotions. By the time you reach your front door, all you can think about is escaping the day. So you reach for a beer. I need this to relax, you think to yourself. What do you guys think about this story? Is this relatable?
It is relatable, but if we stop and dealt with each item along the way, it wouldn't have added up and turned into this big, huge issue.
Absolutely. We all have days where it feels like it's just one little thing after another, just kind of building up on this. And if the story sounds familiar, you're not alone. Every day we deal with things not going our way. We have ideals. It goes back to those irrational beliefs about the way that we feel the world should be. And when the world does not meet those expectations, we can find ourselves swallowed up by negative emotions. So acceptance is the act of sorting out the things that you can change from the things that you cannot. This is both a mindset and a skill, and it improves as you practice it. So failing to accept a situation you cannot change causes you to suffer emotional distress, such as negative feelings, frustration, anger, and sadness. These negative emotions can stick with you longer than the situation that caused them. So practicing acceptance. There is internal and external acceptance. The internal acceptance is your thoughts and feelings. It's your internal world. This includes the way you act or interact with your inner world. We have hundreds of thoughts every day, causing a variety of negative and positive emotions. And practicing acceptance simply means acknowledging the existence of negative thoughts without resisting them and without passing judgment. External world means your environment and people. This is learning new ways to interact with the world we live in, sorting out what you can and cannot change, and knowing the difference. Not allowing those things that you cannot change to affect the way that you think and feel. Being non-judgmental. This is also a skill that many of us need to practice. Each day, we pass judgment on every thought, emotion, and experience that we encounter. Being non-judgmental basically means learning to acknowledge those inner aspects of self and those external aspects of the world without labeling them. We label all of our thoughts, our experiences as bad or good, right or wrong, and even fair or unfair. But this means to simply observe those thoughts, emotions, and experiences as they occur without passing those labels. Those labels, good or bad, right or wrong, they can cause us to have unnecessary negative feelings. So down here, you see a chart where we've seen some judgmental thoughts from our example in the beginning versus some ways to change that to some non-judgmental thinking. So you have, it's bad that no one has fixed this air conditioner and it's 86 degrees on this bus. Having a non-judgmental thought would be, it's hot on the bus, and this is because the air conditioner is broken. Do you notice how that statement has no judgment? So no judgment means no emotions attached to it. So here's another example. It's wrong that I should have to be late for work because they didn't hire enough staff. We can change that to non-judgmental thinking by saying, the coffee shop is shorthanded, and I stood in line for a long time. That is a very neutralizing statement that helps us to not connect negative emotions to that experience. Any questions about that part? All right. So being present focused is another part of acceptance. This is not permitting the past or future to affect the present moment by lingering in your thoughts. You'll notice that I have our friend the cow in the corner here. Our cow is here to remind us of the way in which rumination works in our system. So for many of you, and some of you don't know this, a cow has more than one stomach. When a cow eats grass, it chews it, processes it into the first stomach, and then it brings it back up and chews it again for the second stomach, which is often referred to as a cow chewing its cud. So rumination can be compared to this. It is basically the regurgitation of old thoughts and events in your mind repetitively, bringing them back up over and over again to chew on them. But what happens is when you bring up the thought, you also bring up the emotions that are tied to it. So you're continually regurgitating negative emotions like anxiety, fear, sadness, even frustration and betrayal over and over again, like our friend the cow here. So future events can also affect this. If you are feeling nervous, anxious, or angry about an upcoming event, you feel those emotions each time you think about it. So when you're being present focused, it takes practice. Our minds, they easily wander all day. So this means making a conscious effort to remain focused on what is happening right now. And acceptance does not mean you approve of negative things that occur. This is a very common misconception with folks who are just learning to practice acceptance. I hear people say, but does that mean that I have to say that it's okay what he or she did to me? No, you do not have to condone or say that what has been done to you is right. Acceptance simply means that you acknowledge that this thing has happened to you and move on. Any questions on this? On acceptance? All right. Setting SMART goals. This may be familiar to some of you. So a goal is like baking a cake. There is a difference between, or there are specific instructions and ingredients that you have to add to make a cake look and taste good. Consider the following ingredients for an effective goal. A goal should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. So specific, the more detailed the goal, the more likely to succeed. That would be the difference between saying, I want to quit smoking, and I want to quit smoking by reducing my cigarette smoke each day for the next month. Which goal sounds more effective to you guys?
Second.
The second one? So a goal should also be measurable. How will you know if you are achieving your goal? This means setting little milestones. Like for our example, you could say, I should be to half a pack in 2 weeks. I should be down to 5 cigarettes in 3 weeks, and so on and so forth. It's a way for you to measure that you're actually doing what you set out to do. Achievable. Is it possible to achieve this goal? You know, it's very cute when I do classes with younger folks and I say, okay, what's a goal that you want to set for your career? And they tell me, I'm going to make $1 million by the time I'm 24. I'm going to run a business out of my parents' basement. That's not very achievable. And that also leads to the second one, which is the goal realistic? Evaluating whether or not a goal can be met at this time in your life. You know, there's a time and place for everything. And while a goal might be doable a year from now, there might be things going on in your life right now that goal is not doable. Now, that is not a reason to put off recovery from addiction, because any time is a good time to remove ourselves from an addiction. But when it comes to other goals in our lives, you know, this might not be a good time for a job change. Maybe next year, especially with this year. And then time bound. Setting a time limit to complete your goals. Otherwise, it becomes the never-ending story. And there's really no way to set yourself into actually achieving this goal. So, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. SMART goals. So, practicing SMART goals. Now it's time to set your own SMART goals. Read the example of goal setting in your workbook. Then complete the goal-setting exercise located in the appendix of your workbook for practice using the SMART formula. When finished, return to this video for the final portion. All right, so some final thoughts. Expecting change. You can make a cage for change. Expecting that you can make changes and will reach your goals is at the heart of personal growth. So I'd like us all to practice. You can either say this out loud or in your head, but repeat this statement after me. I expect that I will achieve my goals and create a positive cage that has no place for addiction. I'll give you guys a second. So there are some things that we need to expect when it comes to change. The first is dealing with discomfort. Change does not come without some level of discomfort. There can be many aspects of discomfort in change, such as physical pain, withdrawal symptoms, anxiety and depression, frustration and anger, and loneliness. Use the tools of practicing acceptance and positive self-care to deal with these discomforts when they arise. And prepare for barriers and setbacks. Some barriers are predictable. You are already aware that they can or will occur, such as a friend or family member that's going to give you a hard time about quitting drinking. Some are unforeseeable. They come in unexpectedly in the process of change. Create a plan for dealing with predictable barriers and use your new coping skills to deal with the unforeseeable. So we've discussed many ways today to examine our cages and self-reflection in order to prevent addiction. Examined the stages of change, including pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. We've examined relapse and discussed the differences between slips, lapses, and relapses in recovery. You learned about self-care and the importance of it in your growth. And we reviewed the creating a cage for change method, which encompassed coping skills, acceptance, goal setting, and expecting change. And now it's the time to take the Module 4 quiz. Review the additional materials that are located in this module, watch the conclusion presentation, and then complete the appendix exercise class reflection so that you will have something to discuss with your referral source. Thank you.